All right, welcome back to another edition of the Best of Empty the Bench for 2020. Tom Albano here, Nick Fodera and Nick Morgasen as always. And gentlemen, this is going to be the first of two episodes in which we're going to take a little detour. We're going to sidetrack a little bit here. We're not going to talk about a sports league in general. We'll get to the sports leagues again in the next one. But right now, we're going to talk about another storyline of sports in 2020. We'll have two of these little sidetrack episodes. This one's going to be the first. And in this one's going to be a little bit of a rough subject, we will admit. This is some civil unrest that has happened in this country, a lot of civil unrest.
This was a tough year in this regard. We had some unfortunate situations. I mean, if COVID wasn't enough, then we have unfortunate situations with protests and sports leagues. The NBA walks out on and basically cancels a week's worth of games, and it basically all spiraled from there.
I was gonna say we were dealing with COVID and its aftermath, being stuck in our homes and everything, and then this happened. A world that had a lot of confusion and depression and anger and all those emotions just really spiraled as a result of what happened in May and I think July or August was Jacob Blake.
Basically, the summer itself.
Yeah.
And I will say a lot of this was it started off with the murder of Jacob Blake the murder of George Floyd on in Minneapolis, and it really was a remarkable thing to see that you had hundreds of thousands, even millions of people marching in the streets in a show of force and solidarity that I don't think has been seen in a long time. But the far-reaching effects of what that period in this year will have on the rest of America, I think remains to be seen. But we can still, I think, kind of marvel at what people were able to come together in such a polarized state as we're in right now, to basically say to rail against injustice, and it really was an amazing thing to see, at least from my perspective. Of course, I must recognize that we, the three of us, are all cisgender white people, so our perspective on such things is going to be inherently limited. Would you both agree in saying that?
Yes.
I would agree in that regard, but I would say that we did a lot of research and a lot of understanding to these topics to make sure that we were not ignorant to these people and how it was handled, and making sure that we give the proper importance necessary to make sure we understood and just didn't look foolish trying to talk about these topics.
Yes, and I think this was really the first time where you actually saw it directly affect sports in a way that wasn't paying,
this
inconsequential lip service to an actual systemic problem.
I was gonna say this was more than somebody taking a knee.
Yeah, this was more than that. This was because taking a knee, as symbolic as it is still a gesture. It's not actually trying to do anything to root out systemic racism and police brutality.
Well, remember, this
drew attention to it in a way that few things have.
Right. Well, I'm trying to make an example. Like the NFL, we had obviously, the circumstances with the NFL and Colin Kaepernick a few years ago, but this was the first time, where it seemed like Goodell was actually listening to the players in a regard of something like this matter.
I would say also that Roger Goodell had no choice in this regard, because if he totally ignored this whole situation, this all would have come crashing down on him in ways that the league would have come down on him.
We had teams refuse to take the field.
Well, I was going to say Rob Manfred. Remember when I think it was correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was something involving the Mets when they had their own.
They walked out. They walked out on the field. They all stood there. They did the national anthem, and then they
No,
walked
but
off
I'm
the field.
referring to is a certain piece of audio that came out afterwards that Rob wanted them to come back onto the field and actually
Yes,
play again.
and that caused a shitstorm
I'd say
afterward.
that I would say that played a big role in Rob Manfred's, like he was already declining in popularity, but this year he shot down.
He hit the floor.
It was like a bad version of a stock portfolio, like where you hit the
Very
highest
bad.
point, and then all of a sudden, oil sells out, and your stock portfolio goes down in the down direction.
I mean, we make this point in the clips you're about to see, but this Rob Manfred, a lot of I think of the movers and shakers in North American sports were never prepared to deal with this.
No,
They never thought they would have to.
Well, this is of movement. Like I said, obviously we had, the Black Lives Matter movement, et cetera, in 2014.
In the aftermath of Ferguson. But
I'd say yeah, and what happened in Staten Island. Obviously we had that, but I think I even say it in one of the clips, like the movement got bigger. It got to a point that we have never seen before.
It became a political force.
It became something that we had never seen before. But then again, also 2020 and COVID and everything, it's all something that we have never seen before.
2020 is just, and I'm sure we've said this a million times, 2020 is just that year that everything just fell in one way or another in a rarity at the same time. And
because if anything, if you can glean anything from these past couple of episodes that we've done, and to try and encapsulate everything that this year was, it really was the point where all the artifice fell away and we saw a lot of the ugliness that was percolating below the surface.
People are going to look back at
that people of color have to deal with every day that we are kind of shielded from. We meaning,
I think I would argue one better. I don't think we still understand because we
don't.
We don't understand. And what I was starting to say was that people are going to look back at 2020, whether it's COVID, whether it's politics, whether it's civil unrest. People are going to look back at this 10 years from now and be like,
everybody's exhausted.
Right. And like in 2030, when we look back at this, wait a minute, we dealt with all this in 2020. How did we get through it?
I was going to say, maybe we can be a stronger people at that point.
And the one thing that, and I'm going to ask, I don't know, more of a rhetorical question in sorts, which is, and I think you know where I'm going with this. Which league was the only league that understood how to handle this the right way?
The NBA.
Well, I think the NBA's hands were also, I was like, they are player-driven league, but I think their hand was also forced when the Bucks walked off the court.
When the players flexed their muscle.
Well, they had a situation with, I think the player's name was Sterling Brown, I think, where he got pulled over. Well, I don't remember the whole situation, so I don't want to.
He
got pulled over by a cop.
Yeah.
And there was a alleged physical situation, and then he had to settle with the police, and he was one of the guys that led the movement, which eventually led to all the players walking out.
Well, I was going to say, we had some ugliness that came with it, because then we had all the players-only meeting. We had these reports that LeBron was hating it and, didn't want them to do it, and then he went
Which was weird, because LeBron is usually one of those guys who gets behind all these movements.
He is usually the vanguard of stuff like this.
But we have seen, I was going to say, we have seen both with the China situation at the start of the season and with this, when the ring, when money and all that comes up, we see him turn his coat a little.
And that was strange in very bizarre ways.
This period of time, during this year, during the season, is really when you started to hear people say, look, money be damned. Enough is enough here. We've got to do something.
I think we were already saying that with COVID. We were saying money be damned.
But we saw thousands.
But now the touch paper has been lit. The fuse has been lit. And if you don't do something, it's going to explode.
And you saw guys like Chris Paul, who's the president of the Players Association. I think he walked out with Russell Westbrook where they came and they showed it on ESPN, if I remember correctly, that they pretty much said, we're done. We're not playing. We're going back into the locker room inside the bubble. And I think they essentially walked out in street clothes and said, I'm done. That's it.
And I really think, if you listen to these clips that we're about to see, I don't think the enormity of it really hit us. But
it was a terrible time, unfortunately.
And so we're gonna look back on an honest discussion we have about George Floyd. Obviously, this isn't going to be everything that we've touched on. If you want our full conversations, all these matters, I will mention in the little descriptions of what each is. Where you can find it, whether it was during our podcast days or whether it was on our Facebook Lives.
Right. And one more thing before we go there. Just be clear when you're watching this specific best of. This is not the typical episode that we do. This is a serious discussion on matters that needed to be looked at in the world of sports itself.
Right. So just to bring it an honest discussion about George Floyd from episode 40. During our interview with Freddie Coleman, which we are promoting a lot during this best of times, we even asked him a couple of questions. We had about the protests and the effect of the world, the craziness of the world that it would have on sports, and a couple of breaking news streams in which, after the Jacob Blake shooting, when the protest, when the wildcat strikes is as it's been described, were going on. So, a lot to delve into, a lot of emotional topics. Take a listen, and we'll see you next time.
All that we can do, the three of us, is just support the Black community.
Support the First Amendment.
First Amendment, yes.
Everybody has
any way that we can.
Everybody has the freedom of speech to speak. Everyone should have the right to protest, like I said. Everyone should be allowed to have their opinions as long as they're respectful. I think that's the key word that's missing in these conversations. If you can't be respectful and you're going to be offensive to people, you shouldn't talk. And if you're going to be offensive, there's the door, walk out.
And I'd say we've seen a lot of bad takes, a lot of unnecessary takes. And I know among the three of us, some of us have differing opinions on police or different opinions on the level of protesting that can go down. But in the end, I hope you guys agree with me. There's a way we can find a solution. There's a way we can build a bridge together. And there's a way that we can say, like as Nick was saying, all three of us are white, so we may not understand fully what the Black community is feeling, what the Black community is feeling.
We definitely don't.
But we're here for you. We will listen to you.
Whatever you need.
Let's I'll take a word from a conversation that a couple of protesters and police officers had near my work. Let's build a solution. Let's find something. Let's come together.
And you know what? I'll tell a quick anecdote, which is because I've been working in and out of the city. You guys know I work in the radio business near Madison Square Garden, and I see the cops every day when I go to work. Being in New York City, it's been some scary times just trying to get around the city. You see the National Guard, you see the police, and like I'm walking around and I went up and I spoke to one of them. I just said, "How's everything going out here?" And they just said that they're a little on edge because they don't know how to react in these situations because they don't want to be called out for doing something wrong if they do something wrong.
And a lot of people have been doing something wrong. I mean, think about how the protesters must feel when you're trying to make your voice heard. You're trying to affect real change, and you're getting tear gassed or having the stuffing beat out of you, just for the crime of standing there and being not or even if you aren't Black. There's been a lot of abhorrent behavior, and I just
a bunch of players, including Saquon Barkley, Odell Beckham Jr., Michael Thomas, Patrick Mahomes, I think Mark Ingram may have been it. I don't know.
I think so.
Mark Ingram basically came together and publicized a video together, basically supporting the Black Lives Matter movement.
It was a really powerful video.
It was basically them criticizing the NFL for not allowing peaceful protests.
And say what you guys will about Colin Kaepernick. We've had our disagreements on this show and on the Unspoken podcast about Colin Kaepernick, but 4 years, he was right. He was absolutely right. This is exactly what he was kneeling against. And people, you know what? You couldn't stand it when he was kneeling, and you can't stand it when they're smashing stuff. So how would you like them to protest?
And again, I realized I was wrong in that. Now, I'm actually going to take the words of somebody else. I may not like the kneeling, but he has every right to do so. He has a First Amendment.
That's how we started this.
And you know whose words those are, by the way? Sorry to bring up a little politics in this, but Jesse the Body Ventura, who was as far on the right as I can think of.
Yeah, he's somewhere between Yosemite Sam. But it's just.
But the thing I would say is
he was right. He was right the whole time.
I want to bring up one more player, by the way, because we never mentioned him.
I mean, by the way.
What happened?
Kaepernick, I mean, by the way.
Well, I'll bring up one more player, by the way. Aaron Rodgers, because he also came after Breeze. And if you remember going back to that 2017 season, if some players didn't kneel, they were all interlocking arms together. And
Aaron Rodgers their arms up.
Oh, no, they were interlocking arms.
No, but they also, like, during the anthem, they held their arms up.
So some of them did, but no, but there were also teams who did the interlocking of arms.
Yeah.
And Aaron said they got a lot of crap for that, which I think.
But Nick,
I want to really screwed up. That
I want to go back. I want to go back to one point, which is something that you say all the time when we see stupidity on social media.
Watch what you tweet.
Right, Nick? Watch what you tweet.
Watch what you tweet.
Because now it leads to a national disaster in the NFL. It leads to a national disaster in social media. And now we're seeing marches and protests, which allowed, but he's exacerbating the issue.
And I could honestly see another 2017-like season happening in 2020.
But I think Roger Goodell has a problem on his hands because
Roger Goodell says that he's going to listen. He condemned racism and everything.
I don't believe it because 4 years ago he could have done something about this. And
the absolute bare minimum you could do is condemn. Donate to bail funds. Donate to lawyers. Donate to legal funds.
Oh, speaking of donate, by the way, Michael Jordan, who never spoke out on anything, is donating $100 million over the next 10 years.
Over the next 10 years,
$100 million over the next 10 years to, I think not only the NAACP. I think there's a bunch of.
There were multiple charities.
Different organizations. Yes.
I heard somebody on Twitter say, and I'm paraphrasing here. Somebody told Michael that the racist told him he can only score 25 points on a good night.
Oh. Wow. Oh.
Mr. Republicans wear sneakers too. My opinion is I don't have an opinion, has decided to come out of the woodwork and donate $100 million over the next 10 years.
Guys, you know who else was condemning? You know who else put out a statement? Derek Jeter, another neutral party.
And just
Derek Jeter did too?
Wait.
I'm not sure if he donated anything, but he came out and condemned and said, we need to have and do better.
Just for contextual sake, remember that Derek Jeter is biracial. So
yes.
we need to remember that when he makes a statement.
Yes, but again, he, just like Michael, never was in the line of controversy, never really took any stances.
I was surprised when he put a statement out.
Believe me, I'm just as surprised. This is the
first
I've heard of it.
That's the point.
The first I've heard of it, and my mind is pretty. You can't see me, but my mind is blown right now.
What do you make of MLB's more overt gestures during the social justice movement, and just what do you make of the social justice movement in general going on in sports?
Well, it's definitely a sign of the times, and I think for the longest time, people wanted to know exactly what leagues were going to say or do about issues because more than ever before, guys, that line is going to be blurred between sports and social issues, and athletes are no longer just going to sit on their hands or close their mouths when they believe it and they know they have a platform to speak out on that. So I was not surprised to see that from Major League Baseball or anybody else when it comes to social justice issues. And I know that it's going to continue for more than a little bit. I'm completely okay with that. And that's something that's going to have to be part of the sport's DNA, no matter what sport it is, for more than a little bit. And I'm sure there are going to be some fans that are going to be turned off by that. And hey, that is their right to feel that way. I'm not going to say that they're right. I'm not going to say that they're wrong. But I don't think this is going to be the kind of thing that's going to be a fly-by-night thing. It's going to continue for more than a little bit. But the question is, outside of what we've been able to see, what kind of other actions are you going to do as a league? It's one thing to have lip service and talk about we need to do better, we're going to do better. But what are you going to do about that if you're Major League Baseball, if you're the National Football League, if you're football coaches in college, and definitely other sports as well? I want to see going forward exactly what's going to manifest itself with when it's no longer the sign of the times with social justice and those things being talked about in professional sports and even in college sports.
I was talking with these guys a little bit last night, and I had said, this is going to remind me the political atmosphere and everything going on, social atmosphere in the sports world right now. It's going to remind me a lot of the 2017 NFL season. The only thing I say that might be different with that is I'm not sure if people will be as quick to abandon as quickly with sports because we went sportsless for so long with this pandemic. Would you agree on both ends?
Yeah, I completely agree with that because think about this. 2020 is definitely a lot different than 2017 because there seems to be more of a united situation. And even if players don't agree with kneeling, if players don't agree with what guys are doing, that doesn't mean they're going to voice their objection to the point that they're going to cause a distraction. They're going to say, that's the way you feel, but this is the way I feel. So that's why the climate is so much different than 2017. Back then, it was a kind of us over here and athletes over there. That doesn't seem to be the case. And that doesn't mean that it's 100% the other way in favor of athletes, but it seems that a lot of athletes speaking up and speaking out, they've been able to gather a lot more people on their side. Even if they oppose it, they're no longer having that complete disapproval that we saw that was prevalent when it was definitely adversarial, where it was people who did not want kneeling for the national anthem on one side and everybody was made to be a pariah on the other side. I don't think that's still prevalent, but I don't think it's as much as we saw back in 2017.
Strong statement by the Bucks, right?
Mm-hmm. Very strong statement. And I guess you can see it has resonated with all of sports. The WNBA also electing to postpone all of its games today. You're seeing the Milwaukee Brewers, boycott their game against the Cincinnati Reds. That's officially postponed. And the Brewers, in their statement, in part said this was done in part because of what the Bucks did. And for the Bucks and Brewers, completely makes sense even to a higher degree than the rest of the teams, considering that this incident took place in the state of Wisconsin.
Right, and we'll get to the other sports, but Tom, you said something interesting to me, which I want to bring back up here. There's kind of two decisions that describe this, right? So one is business and one is ethics. So tell everybody what you said to me.
So we were going over the thing, and this is obviously a decision where ethics and morals will win over business, as it should. But it can't be ignored that it's a great, moral move, great ethics move, because we need change. But we can't lie that this isn't going to be bad business-wise. So let's bring some attention to rumors. I know I don't like bringing in rumors, but this rumor can't be ignored about the players meeting tonight. There is a rumor going around that as a result of this incident, as a result of the motives of players, this could potentially end the 2019-2020 playoffs. There just won't be a winner. There just won't be a champion, which is, like we said, you can't focus on basketball right now. But you're going to have a lot of people crying out, then why did we do the bubble idea?
Right. That's what I said to you. And people are going to crash all over us saying, like, how could you care about the NBA or Major League Baseball or WNBA or any sport?
We're not.
Right, and we're not. Let's make that very clear here. We're talking about the issue itself. We're not taking a side. We're not saying they should do this or that. We're talking.
We're living in weird. Sorry to interrupt, but we're living in weird times. We're living in a historical time. This is not a normal year. This is not a normal time right now.
2020 will be a year for the record books. And I hate to say it, but it's going to be, between the COVID situation, the protests and the boycotts, the civil unrest, and so on. Like, we're not living normal lives right now. We have the holidays coming up in 2-3 months. We're not going to be able to do that. And we all need to just kind of take it down a notch, try to understand and be educated on the issue rather than jumping to a conclusion so quickly.
Like I said, it's a great move that I support, from an ethics standpoint, from a moral standpoint. I'm just saying that it is going to be a bad business move. Now, sometimes in business, you have to make bad business moves. And with the NBA, they are the most progressive league, as you know, out of the big four sports. They probably don't give two you-know-what that this is a bad business move. But you will have pundits and critics that will say, why bring the NBA bubble in? Now, I will say another thing that I told you earlier. But the one thing that, let's say it did end. Let's say there was no champion. From at least what we have, and we have talked about this over the past few weeks, we know at the very least the bubble system works.
It works.
So say if there is one good sports thing that could come out of, no champion being crowned, you won't have to wait very long for next NBA season, because the next NBA season they were discussing maybe go through starting December, and you go into maybe July or August, and
sometime between May and August, somewhere around there.
I'd say, well, now let's say if there is no champion this time, you could probably start that season in November, only a 1-month delay, and by next season you could be back on track, back in October.
But we got to be careful here, because the NBA seems to be, I don't know what the proper journalistic term really is, but they're very strong on the issues when it comes to civil unrest, making sure everybody is protected, and understanding to be educated. So I don't know if we're going to have games for a while, and we might see canceled games in both the NBA and MLB for quite a few weeks over this. And saying there's no way they can finish this season if LeBron, who tweeted or Instagrammed or whatever athletes do at this point in time, finally said, "Oh, well, we're going to come out and say that we're boycotting the season." And it's not suspended, it's boycotted.
Of course, they probably have to use the word boycott because there's specific language against strike in their CBA. So I would imagine that's why they're using the word boycott, even though it's not technically a boycott. But I don't want to get wrapped up too in the semantics, because that's beside the point. That's neither here nor there.
Right.
So that being the case, I guess I should chime in on how I'm feeling about all this, because I didn't get a chance to be on with you guys last night. I feel like a lot of these players are sick to death of everything we've had to go through this year, between the pandemic, between what's happening with George Floyd. It's like they've run out of ideas, and now they're just trying the most desperate option, the break glass in case of emergency. And I really hope that it does get people to wake up to exactly the horrible things that are going on in this country, because nobody seems to care as long as they can get basketball on their TV. Because, they say sports is a good panacea for people. It gets people's mind off, the horrible things that are going on. But sometimes you need to have both eyes on these things. I mean, am I making sense here?
Yeah.
I mean, we are having, this was part of Nick and I's discussion yesterday, and I feel like, sports as escapism, it's still there, but over the last few years, we haven't seen that as much. We've seen the blending come in.
Right.
Like, this is not separation. I said yesterday, this is not separation of church and state.
Right.
We've seen social tumult over the past 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
That has taken pretty much every stripe, and we haven't seen this. We're in new uncharted territory here, folks.
Well, that's the other thing that we brought up, was that, and I think we said this after the George Floyd murders too, that this is not the same protests from 2014, 2015. This is completely different now.
what are the Lakers and the Clippers going to do? Because those were the rumored teams that come out and said,
Right. We had the bombshell last night after we had gone off that the Lakers and Clippers were going to be pulling out of the playoffs. LeBron and Kawhi Leonard, Anthony Davis were all going to be exiting the bubble. And once that happened, because I remember I had seen Schlosser's response to it from our old friend, and I had said, that's probably what's going to happen. It's going to be a big star like a LeBron, a Kawhi who leaves, and that, because everyone was saying, all the likes of Stephen A. and all of them NBA insiders were saying that, as much as we've been saying in the COVID era, you can't put asterisks on anything. Like, this would be an asterisk situation because you're having all these two big teams, all these stars who would now be departing, and then you would have, the impact that it would have social justice wise when it comes to these leagues. And then on the sports end of it, would that have meant Dallas and Portland were going to move on via a forfeit 7-8?
That's the problem here. And
we're in uncharted territory.
Right. And the issue we're having is that we heard in the reports from the meeting that LeBron stormed out of the meeting and was not happy, and I guess we could start making crying LeBron memes at this point because we'll go from crying Jordan.
We don't really know the context as of why he was upset and what might have gotten him to leave.
Yeah. So the context to that. So first, we had assumed that it was just, LeBron was one of these athletes who, has been very vocal at social justice issues. But now we also hear about these meetings that apparently a lot of the NBA teams were pretty PO'd at the Bucks for not informing the rest of them.
How much can we really expect the NBA to provide to try to ameliorate the situation that goes beyond lip service? Because everything that all the overtures that they've made can really be boiled down to, okay, you can have a little social justice as a treat. But in terms of actually trying to make things better, they are a corporation, and the corporation's not going to shake the monkey tree too much.
This is what we talked about.
They're not going to rock the boat, I should say. That's a better way.
All right. So, well, first of all, before I get to that point, Nick, what is your feeling then on, if it is true, that that the whole entire NBA, including LeBron, were mad at the Bucks? Should they have been mad?
Mad at the Bucks for not playing? I mean, look.
No, for the railroading.
I'd say that why didn't you tell us?
Railroading.
Well, I think some communication would be necessary, but I do think it was necessary for them to not play because
I was going to say, but remember, the Bucks have two players who have been in situations involving police in the past.
Sterling Brown.
Yeah, you need a dramatic example to get people to pay attention to how screwed up this is. And
let's say that the NBA playoffs, did come to an end, and basically, that is a strong statement, and that is a statement where you can say ethics and morals are needed over business, but we can't lie and say that the business end, it isn't going to hurt. It's still going to hurt.
Yeah, you can't say that the business end of this or the repercussions aren't going to be immaterial.
And actually, Nick, I'm going to use your own words, because then what you're going to open yourself up to if these teams and leagues stop playing. It's then why did we bother to come back from COVID?
Why did we come back? Why did we decide to spend $150 million
on these bubbles?
Yeah, but the players can't reasonably expect that.
Well, that's the other thing. It's like we also say, fallacy of a predetermined outcome. We didn't expect on this day, this incident was going to happen.
If they knew Jacob Blake was going to get shot 7 times in the back by a cop, it's like, I mean,
that's what Tom said last night. Like, there's no crystal ball. That says
they're just doing the best they can. Trying to deal with the shock, the grief, the anger, and really, and if you see a lot of the speeches that are coming out of the NBA, it's heart-wrenching stuff.
What about the MLB with Tom Smith?
Wait a minute. I want to make one point because Nick just said the speeches and the audio. We listened to some of the audio yesterday from the Bucks, who came out afterwards and made a 2-part statement. And I thought it was interesting that they stood there, they made their team statement. The media didn't do what the typical media does, which is interrupt or try to ask questions. They stood there, they made their statement, and they walked out, and they didn't do anything. Because we're so used to in sports that the media has this biased tendencies to make assumptions before they actually get the data and the information.
It's scoop bombing, really. Everybody thinks they're Woj and they're going to be the first. It's about being first, not being right.
He doesn't think Rob Manfred gets it. This whole situation.
Of course, Rob Manfred doesn't get it. Why do you think we're in this situation with a 60-game exhibition season? If he got it, believe me, we wouldn't be in this situation.
So here's the transcript. So Brody said, baseball's trying to come up with a solution to say, what would be super powerful. 3 of us here can't leave this room. That would be really great. If you just have them all take the field, then leave the field, and then they come back and play at 8:10. And I was like, what? And then someone said, who said that? And Van Wegner said, Rob. And with Jeff, scheduling is going to be a nightmare. And there's so much at stake at this point. So basically they were saying, take the field, then come off for an hour and go back.
And again, this goes back to something that I had said before, that if MLB took days off, it would screw up the schedule even more. But we wouldn't be in an already screwed up schedule, well, at least not as much, had, the two sides not clashed at each other and dragged each other through the mud back in March. And we actually got something, a plan underway, because you saw the NFL and NFLPA come together. You saw the NHL and NHLPA come together, but baseball has done more damage to its own credibility this year.
If you expect him to give a fig, then you don't get it. His aim is and always has been commerce, not social justice.
But that's not just him. That's not just him. That's all sports.
I thought you were going to say to destroy baseball. I was going to say he's doing a good job in that.
Yeah, he's doing a good job of that. He's basically a Terminator sent back in time to destroy baseball from the inside out. But that's neither here nor there, folks.
But I mean,
expect these vultures to care about human life is a bridge too far, because
what's interesting?
You gotta be human to care about that first.
No one cares about positive awards this year. I'm just going to say it because no one else is going to admit it. Everyone is when we do the awards this year is going to want to just hear everything negative. And I don't mean that in the way it sounds, but no one cares about the positive awards this year.
Because originally the Lakers and Clippers were going to say adios and leave the bubble.
And go home.
Right. But they all going to play.
I
can tell you why that didn't happen, because money.
Yeah, it's money out of their pockets, and it's money out of the NBA's pockets, especially considering isn't there specific anti-strike language in their CBA?
I don't know what the exact language is, but I think this was more of a technicality situation by LeBron James, who came out and said, oh, well, we don't want to seem like we just purposely canceled the game. We had a purpose.
And LeBron had said that the reason he had stormed out and was mad at the Bucks was because they didn't have a plan. They just did it off of raw emotion.
Just decided not to play and didn't have any plan going forward as to what to do with the leverage that they have, because they did have leverage.
Well, what do you think about this, guys? Because I remember us talking about, like Nick Fodera, you had said that sometimes drastic action needed to be taken. But, LeBron, I mean, let's face it, guys. LeBron, for a money situation, LeBron doesn't exactly need it. It's the guys who aren't going to get the minutes. It's the guys who are the bench players that are going to get affected by this.
It's your workaday players, and it's I really think that they could have held out a little bit longer before they decided to go back to play. I mean,
I think this is more of a situation of we were trying to make a point, but then we realized that we can't just stop playing because then we're not going to make money, even though a lot of the top-tier players are making tens of millions of dollars in this whole situation. Now, if you saw what happened, and we talked about this when this actually happened, the NBA and the China situation, where LeBron came out and made all these statements, and then it affected the relationship, and then the Rockets GM Daryl Morey got into hot water, and we saw the NBA get burned.
In fact, we opened up the year with that.
Yeah.
That should have been a sign as to where things were going.
Well, I was going to say, because I know our friend Schlosser had said this. What do you guys think? Do you think the NBA owes Daryl Morey a bit of an apology?
Well, I think it's apples and oranges with
I think
this,
it's
because the players are rallying for a just cause. I mean, Daryl Morey, this entire NBA China situation was just a means to line billionaires' pockets even more.
I don't know if that is necessarily the case, but I think that, like Nick is saying, is partially accurate, that was more of a marketing / money in the billionaire's pocket situation.
That's precisely what I said.
And
but I feel like this, I think, was a more righteous cause. And of course, with me, I'm not exactly the arbiter of moral righteousness in this country. White privilege talking here, but I do think that they had all the leverage in this situation. The players did. And I think that's the only time where you could actually say that the players were holding all the cards. I just think they folded too soon.
right, but I think the NBA, I don't know, would you say they're the most progressive league when it comes to handling situations?
They have that perception. Whether that's the reality is, again, up for debate.
I think it is. I think it's the most progressive, and remember, it's also the most player driven.
It is the most player driven. That's definitely the case here.
Well, and believe it or not, and I think what a lot of people are missing, even on the big networks, they're missing, is that Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, is actually, in my opinion, one of the stronger commissioners in all of the 4 professional sports, because what is he doing that other commissioners are not doing?
He's
actually
listening.
taking some initiative to fix the issue and listen to what his players are saying?
Thank you. Most networks are not understanding this. Every network I've watched so far, they're saying, oh, well, the players are just stepping out on their own and they're doing everything. That's not true. Adam Silver said, I'm going to help make that initiative for the players work.
Oh,